I want to tell you the history of raw rolling papers, which is really my history with rolling papers. When I was a little kid growing up in New York City, about 5 years old, my dad only knew one magic trick. He would take his rolling paper, an old, beautiful Spanish rice paper named marfil arroz, and he would light it on fire and throw it in the air, and it would just disappear. Nothing would come down, not even ash. And at 5 years old, this was amazing to me. It was magic. And it was the only magic trick my dad knew, so he did it every year. So this kind of brought me into a love and a passion of rolling paper. You go forward many years, and now you're in high school, or I'm in high school, and me and my friends all start smoking. My friends cared a lot more about the strain or the type and this kind of thing. I really only cared about the paper, the mechanism, the device. I was infatuated with all those things. I was obsessed with them, really. I had a huge collection, and I began collecting rolling papers. Then I went off to college, and at one point I'm at the University of Florida in Gainesville, fucking Florida, where I stood out like a sore thumb at the time. I really, really did. And it gave me a lot of free time. So I put my collection online, and I was the first American to really put his rolling paper collection online. There were other collectors in Europe, but I was the only American. And so I began trading with the other collectors in Europe. And so I would send them some little packs here or there, they'd send me back something. But then while I was still in school in Florida, I opened up my first smoke shop. And at that smoke shop, it gave me a chance to start selling some of my collection. So I began this little business of bringing in some papers from Europe, and then I would send them some what I considered to be American garbage. Really, it was stuff that was ugh. And then they would send me these beautiful old European ones. So my store, it helped my store. I had this great collection in the store, and I loved selling the good papers. The bad papers, not so much. This brought me into the rolling paper real industry, you know? And one day one of the collectors hit me up and told me, Josh, there is a man coming from Alcoy. He is reopening a factory that is related to Papeleras y Leonitas, which no one understood what that was except for me and a handful of other people, but it's basically the oldest rolling paper factory in the world. Jose Emilio came to America to look for someone to sell his paper, and the collectors told me about him and said I must meet with him. So I went and met with Jose Emilio, and I sat down. And most of the meeting was like this, because I was very young at the time. Jose Emilio sat there with his arms crossed, looking at me, looking down at me, speaking broken Spanish and English, and my Spanish is muy terrible. So we did our best to communicate. And at one point, with his arms crossed, he looked down at me and said, Josh, why do you even care about rolling paper? So I told him the story of my dad and the marfil arroz and the trick. And Jose lit up and turned to me and said, Josh, I made marfil arroz. My father made marfil arroz. My grandfather made marfil arroz. His great-grandfather, between his side and his wife's side, they'd always been in that region, and they'd all had this long, long history of rolling paper and that particular brand that my dad used to smoke. Now, the brand was long gone, obviously. When the factory was bankrupted, the brand was taken. But we decided right then and there that we were going to bring back marfil arroz, and we couldn't name it that. So I decided to name it Elements, after the elements that are used to make the rice paper. So in my store, the way that my store was a success was I really talked to everybody that came in the door. And from the beginning, when I was first opening up, people came in and told me I must carry, I will not say the brand because I will probably get me sued somehow, a certain brand of natural cigarettes. And they told me how it was natural and better than commercial cigarettes. Great. I ordered it in. Back then you had to buy it directly from the producer. I did. Comes in. I immediately sell. I open up thinking it's going to be this beautiful natural thing, and it was just a regular white looking cigarette. And I sold it to them, and they smoked it, and they're sitting there talking to me, telling me how it's natural and better, and I'm looking right at them as they're smoking, and it's this white cigarette. Now you're talking to a dude who knows paper. He loves paper. And I'm looking at this like, dude, that's not natural. I know paper. I don't know, like, this is a wood-based paper. I don't know if you ever cut down a tree, but it's not white on the inside. That's not natural. And I was just like, okay, whatever. But I knew right then and there what was needed, which was a truly natural paper, one that was still the natural color, which would probably be translucent brown. And so the idea for Raw was founded in my head. And even back then, I knew what I wanted to call it. It was a name that stayed with me. I could picture the paper. I could picture the name. I knew that people would want it. So now we go forward into the years. Now I'm finally making paper in Alcoy. and I knew that I wanted to make raw. So I went around to all the producers at that time, producers of the bulk material, the factory producers of bulk, and I explained to them what the idea was, and I tried to get them on board to make this for me. And every one of them said no. I even went to one that is one of my competitors, because they had their own mass mill and a pulp mill, and I went to them for this, and they laughed at me while drinking coffee. I won't say the type of coffee because that'll tell you exactly who they are. They laughed at me and said in a different language, "No one will want to smoke a paper bag, Josh." And the whole room laughed. And they laughed me out of their office. This all happened. So I went home very frustrated and very upset and back to America. And I thought about this for a very long time because I knew what it was in my head. I knew that people wanted this. I knew it was needed. So I went back to one particular mill, the smallest out of all of them, this old Modiano mill. And I went to talk to them about it, and I approached it from a different way. Rather than asking them to make it for me, I said, "Hey, if I wanted 1 million tons of this, would you make it for me?" And they said, "Yes, of course." I said, "Okay, so you can make it, you will make it. The only question is, what is the quantity that I really need to buy to get you to make this for me?" And so then the process of negotiation began, and I had to buy a lot. It was, at the time, a ginormous, right? Isn't that a word? Ginormous amount. I had to pretty much risk everything I had made up to that point just to accomplish raw. And it was scary, but I had no other choice but to do it. I couldn't have lived with myself any other way. And so I did it. We took the risk, we brought it all up to Alcoy, and we made it into rolling paper. We began really producing raw, and I really mass launched it in 2005. At first it did okay, and it was starting to grow and grow and grow and grow, and then I think it was 2009 when it just fucking soared. That's when it started getting sung about. Because the thing about raw that's different than other papers is, first of all, if you ever take a raw and you hold it up to the light, which is hard to do on camera like this, you can still see all the fibers in it. For rolling paper it's great because it gives it a higher tensile strength, and the flavors and consistencies are much better. And then there are these intrinsic qualities that I can't even describe to you with words, but it's something that you just know. When you're smoking it, you connect to it, you feel it. It just smokes better. This is the old paper, the old ways, and this is the way raw is made. I think I'm the only one who still makes it this way. And so as this paper went out into the world and people began smoking it, especially the connoisseurs, friends of mine like Currency and these guys, but once you smoke it, it's hard to go smoke something else. It just connects with you, especially for a real smoker. And then you fall in love with it. You do, because nothing else smokes quite like it. So one of the things I want to tell you is what raw has become, and what really is all about now, is uplifting. Uplifting, really. It's the same thing. It's all the same thing. Whether we're doing the raw foundation, where we save thousands and thousands of lives around the world, or we're improving the process, making things like the raw loader, just to make it easier for you to fill a cone, 1 million different size cones, papers, anything you can imagine, different styles, you name it, tips, I've got it. I've made every kind of tip you can imagine because you've asked me to. It's all about trying to give you a better experience and uplift you. And we've uplifted millions of people around the world by making them enjoy their smoke just a little bit more. And it's all the same thing. The foundation is just a part of this. The raw foundation, if you don't know what I'm talking about. We have an amazing foundation that I'm extremely proud of. If you understand this as you smoke it, you understand that what this is all really about, which is beauty, yeah? And passion and love and everything fucking positive. So I ask you to enjoy your smoke a little more than you did before. Maybe now you know a little more about it than you ever did. Maybe you know more about it than you wanted to know. But this little paper, this little beautiful translucent brown paper that was a figment of my imagination up until some years ago, this tiny little thing, it's amazing how much it's changed the world.